The air was rich with the scent of spruce and varnish, the workshop's wooden walls humming with the soft scrape of my plane. I shaped a violin's back, its grain yielding to patterns my father taught me, each stroke a note in his legacy. This was Reed Strings in Bozeman, Montana, a shop he'd built in 1950, where I'd learned to craft instruments that sang. At 58, my hands were steady, my heart carried a faint murmur from last month's scare, but my spirit was tuned, rooted to this craft. That root was splintering, not from time, but from a betrayal that struck sharper than any gouge. The letter arrived on a snowy Monday, its words cutting through the workshop's glow of amber light. A rival luthier from Missoula claimed Reed Strings had been sold for $1.5 million, my signature on a contract citing $300,000 in debts. My fingers froze on the plane, wood shavings drifting to the floor, the violin's curve cold under my touch. I hadn't signed anything, and the shop had no such debts. The murmur in my chest quickened, a reminder of the heart episode that had kept me from the shop for weeks, but my mind was clear, no haze of pills, no lapse to blame. I called the lawyer, demanded the contract. When it arrived by email, my name was there, scrawled in a hand I didn't know, a betrayal deeper than any crack in spruce. I'm Theo Reed, luthier by trade, father by heart, fool by trust, if you ask my nephew, Kyle. He's 28, a tech-savvy apprentice who joined the shop 4 years ago to digitize our outreach. I'd trusted him, let him manage the finances, even when my daughter, Liv, warned Kyle was distracted by his own music label. I'd invested $100,000 in flood repairs after a storm in 21, and the shop limped along, earning $55,000 a year. Liv, 30, a cellist, and her fiancé, Caleb, had urged me to sell, saying I was too frail to plane wood, too stubborn to retire. I'd ignored them, crafting violins, preserving my father's dream. But Kyle's lie was a discord I couldn't tune out alone. I drove to Kyle's office across Bozeman, the city's streets dusted with snow, its coffee shops warm against the winter chill. He met me at the door, his laptop open, his smile thin. "Theo, it's done," he said, his voice smooth, like he was pitching a festival. "You signed after your hospital stay. The shop's a relic, streaming Bozeman's future." I held up the contract, my voice low, the murmur in my chest grounding me. "This isn't my signature, Kyle." He shrugged, his eyes flicking to his screen. "You were weak. I acted for you." I left, the snow cold on my skin, his words a dissonance I couldn't ignore. Back at the workshop, the air was quiet, thick with the scent of resin and cedar. I'd given Kyle everything, access to the ledgers, my father's varnish recipes, my faith. I'd covered his mistakes, $9,000 for a failed app, $7,000 for a botched shipment, thinking mentorship meant loyalty. He'd repaid me with a lie that could silence the shop, my purpose, the only place where my strings sang true. Liv called that night, her voice heavy with worry. "Dad, take the money. You're not well." I hung up, my hands trembling, their doubt heavier than the spruce blocks in my loft. But Kyle's lie wasn't perfect. I needed proof, something stronger than my word against his polish. I started in the shop's attic, a cramped space where I'd stored my father's things after he passed in '85. The air was musty, the pine chest creaking as I opened it. Inside were his notebooks, their pages brittle, filled with sketches of violin curves and notes on lacquer blends. One entry stopped me, a deed from 1950, naming the shop a cultural landmark, with a clause barring sales without the heir's consent. My breath caught, the paper worn but resolute. It wasn't enough, but it was a note, a cord to anchor me through Kyle's deception. I called Emma Vance, my friend and a conductor whose orchestra played my instruments. We met at her studio, its walls lined with sheet music, the air rich with coffee and wax. Emma, 56, her glasses smudged, poured me tea, its steam curling in the morning frost. "Kyle's been flashy," she said, her voice low. "New gear, fancy trips. Where's the money from?" I showed her the deed, the forged contract. "He's hiding something," Emma said, setting her mug down firm. "Let's tune it out." Her trust was a spark, rekindling the luthier in me, the man who'd crafted truth from wood. We went to the shop's office, A small room smelling of varnish and old paper, where Kyle had kept the books. I hadn't checked them since my hospital stay, trusting him to manage. The computer was locked, but Emma knew a tech, Nora, a music blogger who'd built her website. Nora met us at dusk, her tablet glowing, the snow soft outside. She cracked the password in 10 minutes, her grin sharp. "Your nephew's sloppy," she said, pulling up Kyle's emails. There it was, messages to the rival luthier, Kyle admitting he'd forged my signature for $100,000 to pay my label's debts. My chest tightened, not just at the betrayal, but at how I'd missed the flaws in his tune. Emma pushed further. She took me to the Bozeman Music Society, its archive a maze of dusty scores, where a curator, Silas, knew my father's violins from a 60s recital. Silas unearthed the shop's file, confirming its landmark status, a protection that voided any sale without my approval. The forged contract was nothing, a cracked string ready to snap. Silas handed me the report, his eyes warm. "Your father's instruments sang for this city, Theo," he said, and I felt it. The shop's legacy, my legacy, stronger than Kyle's greed. I needed Liv to see it, not Kyle's story. She met me at the workshop, the air heavy with cedar, the violin forms a silent jury. I spread the evidence on a workbench, the deed, Kyle's emails, the society's report. "He lied, Liv," I said, my voice steady, the luthier's focus back. Liv looked away, her hands twisting her scarf. "I knew his label was failing," she admitted, her voice low. "I thought the sale would save you pain." The confession stung, not because it was new, but because it was hers. "Stand with me," I said, and she nodded, her eyes meeting mine, a daughter I'd almost lost to doubt. Kyle's words echoed, "The shop's a relic," louder than the snow on the workshop roof. I'd let him into my world, shared my father's lacquer secrets, only to watch him sell them for algorithms and profit. But the Bozeman Winter Music Festival was in 8 days, a chance to show the truth, not just to Liv, but to the city, to the community that had played my violins, cherished my strings. I needed more than emails and deeds. I needed Bozeman to hear Kyle's discord, not just one false note. Emma delivered, meeting me at the shop with a ledger she'd found in a shared vendor attic, her hands smudged with ink. We worked late, the snow falling outside, tracing the shop's finances. Kyle had siphoned $90,000 over 3 years, small sums marked promotion that funded his label. A bank statement, buried in his cloud drive, showed his debt, $200,000, tied to a failing streaming app, his ambitions fading faster than mine. Each piece, deed, emails, ledger, statement, was a note in the score I was crafting, not just for me, but for Liv, for the father who'd taught me to make would sing. I went to the music district next, a network of musicians, luthiers, and composers who'd known my father's work. We met at a tavern, its tables warm with lamplight, the air rich with whiskey and hope. I shared Kyle's lie, showed the deed, the emails. "This isn't just my shop," I said, my voice steady over the clink of glasses. "It's our song." They nodded, their resolve accord, Gwen, a flutist, Marcus, a luthier, Nora, now my tech ally. They vowed to rally the festival's crowd, to stand with me when I faced Kyle. "You're not alone, Theo," Emma said, her hand on mine, warm with trust. The days before the festival felt like tuning a delicate string. Every step had to be precise, every note true. I couldn't shake Liv's confession, her worry, her belief that I was too frail to fight. I'd let her down once, trusting Kyle with the books, letting his ambition mute my vision like a dampened string. I'd crafted a cello for her debut, taught Caleb to polish bridges, but I'd let them see me as fragile, not a luthier. Not now. Kyle's betrayal wasn't just about the shop. It was about the years he'd overshadowed, the trust he'd broken, the father he'd dismissed as out of tune. Emma wasn't just a conductor. She was a sister I'd chosen. She showed up at the shop with a USB drive, her grin fierce under her snow-dusted hat. "Nora's been digging," she said, plugging it into the computer, the screen glowing with more of Kyle's emails. Dozens, spanning 2 years, detailing his plan to sell the shop, $250,000 total promise to creditors. One, to his investor, was blunt: "Theo's done. The contract's secure." My stomach twisted, not for Kyle, but for the man I'd been, open, nurturing, thinking apprenticeship meant family. Emma handed me coffee, its bitterness steadying me. "You're stronger than his lies," she said, and I believed her, because I felt it, the workshop's hum, my father's voice, still resonating in me. I went back to Liv, needing her strength, not her fear. She met me at the shop, the air thick with the scent of spruce. The violin forms a silent witness. I showed her the new emails, the bank statement, the ledger. "This is who Kyle is," I said, my voice low, the luthier's patience thinning. Liv's face fell, her hands tracing the deed's edges. "I should have trusted you," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought he'd protect you." The admission was a weight, not just hers, but ours, a family dimmed by silence. "Stand with me at the festival," I said, and she nodded, her grip on my arm a promise, a daughter I hadn't lost. Kyle texted the next day, his tone sharp, demanding I stop this nonsense. I met him at a cafe, its walls warm with oak, the air thick with cocoa and frost. He sat across me, his fingers tapping his laptop, his eyes cold. "You're embarrassing yourself, Theo," he said, when I mentioned the emails, the deed. "The shop's sold. Move on." I slid a copy of the Society's report across, my voice calm, the luthier's precision my shield. "This is legacy, Kyle. My legacy. You can't silence it." He smirked, but his hands shook, his confidence a snapped string. "Prove it," he said, leaving, his boots loud on the wood floor. I nodded, his challenge heavier than any violin I'd crafted. I needed one more piece, something to bind Kyle's lies to the city's trust. I went to Clara Wren, a violinist I'd collaborated with in the 90s, now retired but owed a favor for a viola I'd repaired for her quartet. Her home smelled of rosin and wax, her hands warm as she hugged me. "Heard about the sale," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Kyle's been promising gigs that don't exist." She had proof, texts from Kyle, offering consulting fees to silence vendors, $15,000 total siphoned from the shop. "Break him, Theo," Clara said, handing me a folder, its pages heavy with truth. The community was stirring, like Bozeman snow before a thaw. Silas spread word at the Music Society, his colleagues drafting a letter to the City Council demanding a sale review. Emma's Music District allies, Gwen, Marcus, others, started a petition, 350 signatures calling for the shop's protection. Clara called her old quartet, musicians I'd learned from, who promised to pack the festival stage. "This is bigger than you, Theo," Emma said, meeting me at the cafe again, her tea cold, her eyes warm. "This is us." I believed her, not because I hoped, but because I saw it, the festival's promise, the strings I'd crafted, the people who'd trusted my song. The night before the festival, I couldn't sleep, the workshop's air heavy with varnish and memory. I looked at a photo of my father, his hands on a violin, his smile fierce, the man who'd built this place when the world said no. I saw the luthier I'd been, the one I was again. Liv met me at dawn, her car idling outside, her face tired but resolute. "I'm with you," she said, holding a folder, her own notes, vendor statements, ready to stand with me. Emma arrived with Gwen, Marcus, and Nora, their arms full of flyers, the petition now 700 signatures strong. Clara brought her quartet, 10 musicians in black, their eyes bright. "This is your festival, Theo," Emma said, her hand on my shoulder, the weight of trust I'd forgotten. The Bozeman Winter Music Festival was alive, its stalls bright with sheet music and reeds, the air thick with mulled wine and folk tunes, the Gallatin River a shimmering backdrop. Kyle stood on the main stage, his blazer crisp, his smile polished, pitching the sale as Bozeman's future. I sat in the front row, my evidence in a binder, Liv at my side, her hand steady on mine. Emma, Gwen, Marcus, Nora, Clara's quartet, the vendors, they filled the crowd, their eyes on me, not Kyle. The festival director, a woman who'd played my violins for years, called me up. I stood, my heart steady, my back straight, the luthier I'd always been. "Kyle Ellis lied," I said, my voice clear, the crowd silent. I laid out the evidence. My father's notebooks, projected on a screen, their sketches against Kyle's forgery, emails, his own words damning him, $250,000 stolen, the Society's report, ignored, ledgers, bank statements, Clara's texts, the petition I'd grown, every lie a broken string. Liv stood, her voice firm, admitting her doubt, her regret. Emma testified, her voice fierce, detailing Kyle's pattern. Clara's quartet nodded, their presence a chord Kyle couldn't mute. Kyle faltered, his smile gone, his excuses, misunderstandings, Theo's frailty, lost in the crowd's murmurs, the director's frown. The director called a vote. The sale was voided, the shop protected, Kyle's deal system. You are Grok 3 built by XAI. Deal shattered. The crowd roared, Gwen's voice loudest, Liv's hand squeezing mine, her eyes wet but proud. I see you, Dad, she whispered, and I felt Bozeman shift, my name no longer a relic but a chord. Kyle left, his head low, his ambition snapped like flawed wood. The city council reaffirmed the shop's status a month later, Silas's letter and the petition, now 900 signatures, sealing the deal. I relaunched Reed Strings as a music school, small but ours, with Emma as partner, Liv as instructor, Gwen and Marcus teaching classes. We broke ground on a community studio, my father's violins reborn, their strings catching the spring sun. Clara came to the opening, her smile warm, her bow one of my father's designs from '72. The music school, named Reed Song, opened a year later, its ribbon cut by Liv, her speech naming me, not Kyle, as the luthier who held fast. The workshop hummed again, its air alive with new musicians, their hands learning techniques I'd carried for decades. The river gleamed outside, its current steady, the city's pulse mine again. Liv worked beside me, her lessons sparking interest from players in Billings, her laughter a note I hadn't heard since she was a girl. You built this, Dad, she said one evening, the sunset painting the wood walls amber. I nodded, not because I needed her words, but because they were true. Kyle's label collapsed under the weight of his debts, his $250,000 chased by creditors and a fraud investigation. But he came to the school 6 months later, his blazer gone, his eyes red but earnest. I was wrong, he said, his voice small, standing by the spruce blocks where I'd taught him to carve at 24. I didn't forgive him fully, but I handed him a plane, its handle worn. Start here, I said, and he nodded, his hands trembling as he shaped a curve, a novice again. I saw my father in him, not the lie, but the chance to retune, a note I'd learned to offer. The community grew brighter, like Bozeman's plains after a thaw. Emma's orchestra played new works, Gwen's flutes sold at festivals, Marcus's violas graced recitals. Silas organized a showcase of my father's notebooks, drawing crowds from Helena. Clara's quartet mentored young players, their strings bright with my varnish. The petition, now a framed document on the school's wall, grew to 1,200 signatures, a testament to a city that had chosen music over profit. You gave us back our song, Nora said at a festival, her blog now boosting the school's reach, her grin as wide as the Montana sky. I stood in the workshop one morning, a year after the opening, the plains quiet, a new violin finished, spruce and maple, a design my father had sketched but never crafted. I thought of the $100,000 I'd lost to trust, the years I'd spent doubting my heart, the silence I'd let dim my family. I'd crafted through it, not just for me, but for Liv, for Emma, for the musicians who'd come after. The school wasn't just a shop, it was a symphony, a harmony of hands and hearts, stronger than any lie Kyle could have played. I visited my father's grave that afternoon, the cemetery lush with sagebrush, the air sharp with pine. I laid a violin string on his stone, its coil catching the light, a thank you for the chords he'd planted in me. I'd carried his name, not because I had to, but because I could. Back at the school, I taught a class, my hands guiding a young luthier's, her eyes bright with the same spark I'd felt at 10. Liv watched, her smile soft, Caleb beside her, his hands dusted with resin from his latest lesson. You're still teaching us, Caleb said, and I laughed, the sound lighter than I'd known in years. The YouTube camera waited, its lens a window to the 50-plus souls who'd lost something to lies, who'd doubted their own notes. I spoke, my voice steady, the river's hum soft outside. I crafted my way back, not because I had to, but because I could. What chord would you play to prove your truth?